So earlier today, Brian Murphy, who's about to join us from WRAL Investigative Sports Reporter, had these tweets. Bipartisan U.S. Senate bill that would not allow people to get charitable tax deduction for contributions to compensate athletes for NIL. And then college athletes have the ability to benefit from opportunities related to their NIL. Outside organizations, collectives should not be able to write contributions off their taxes that are being used to compensate athletes. That's not from Brian, that's from John Thune, the senator, Republican senator from South Dakota. And then he mentioned that North Carolina State and North Carolina both offer tax-deductible donation options for those who are involved in the NIL. Brian joins us on 365 Sports with Paul Craig and also David Smoak. Brian, we've been down this road before. Do you think anything will change?
It's really hard to see this Congress, as divided as it is, passing a bill that deals with NIL. I mean, there are some larger bills that would deal with NIL. This is a very targeted bill. John Thune and Ben Cardin are both, key senators on the committee that would deal with this kind of stuff. And the fact that they introduced it last year and it didn't go anywhere kind of tells me that this probably isn't going anywhere. The fact that nobody else has signed on as a co-sponsor seems to be an indication that this probably won't go far.
It seems to be also opportunity. They had an NIL hearing on Capitol Hill a month ago, so try to get it back out in the ether, so to speak, Brian. But one of the other things, won't it be problematic to pass this, given that a lot of the people that it affects also make donations to politicians and don't want whatever tax they want to be able to do with their money, what they want to do with their money, and write off whatever they're supposed to be able to write off?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me at least to make sense that you wouldn't be able to write this off, but you can also write off a lot of contributions to athletic departments that then go to pay for fired coaches or contract extensions. So, this is a tricky space, I think, for politicians because of what you said. The same people that are often funding those campaigns are often funding athletic departments all around the country. And so this isn't like specific to a specific state or anything. This is, I think it's something like 40 of the states have Division I football programs. So you're going to run into problems if you try to pass this in many, many states.
Brian, the NIL, of course, just hit everybody almost blindsided. It took forever, and then all of a sudden, here comes Katie bar the door. It's almost like the transfer portal. Do you see anybody getting close to putting their arms around it, or do you feel like it's still, for right now, the wild, wild west?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, they're moving in the opposite direction. So here in North Carolina, basically there's an executive order from the governor that kind of regulates NIL. There was a key senator, I wrote about this a couple weeks ago, a key senator said, hey, we need to get rid of that executive order. Other states are moving much faster and allowing way more stuff than we are, so we don't want that executive order to hold us back here in North Carolina. And so she said, we need to get rid of the executive order. So if anything, I think it's moving the opposite direction in the sense that some states, I think Arkansas, Colorado, are pushing the boundaries and saying, look, the NCAA can't even investigate NIL issues if they pop up in our state.
Yeah, Brian, so if that's happening at the state level and they're trying to do things at the national level, is this just window dressing when people say it because somebody's asked them about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in some ways, Charlie Baker, the new NCAA president, has even a better case, I think, to go to Congress and say, hey, we need a national law. If all these states are gonna race to the bottom, you could say, or race to the most lenient policy possible, he could say, look, we can't have 50 different states having 50 different policies. We need one national standard. Whether that flies in a Congress that I said is, bitterly divided. I mean, they've got more important things to do. I guess is probably the best way to put it than worry about NIL at the moment. It's hard to see a sports bill getting the kind of traction it needs to get through the process at the federal level. And so, I mean, to me, it's up to the NCAA. Like, this is your job, right? Your job is to regulate college athletics. Come up with a solution, figure this out. And they've just been trying to punt to the national, to the federal Congress for the last year or maybe even longer.
Do you feel like Matt Baker will have at least a better puncher's chance because of his background? Charlie
Yeah,
Baker. Charlie Baker. I'm sorry, Charlie
sure.
Baker.
Yeah, the former governor of Massachusetts. He's a Republican. Obviously, was able to work with Democrats in Massachusetts to not only get elected, but Democrats in the state legislature there. Sure, I think he probably has a better chance than Mark Emmert, who kind of became everybody's punching bag. But you run down the list of important issues for Congress, and I'm just not sure this hits the top 10 or the top 20 for very many representatives. Senator Tuberville, a former college football coach, is trying to get a bill together with Joe Manchin, but that doesn't seem to be getting much traction either. So, and then there's a Democratic proposal that would be guarantee athletes health care and be a much more pro athlete, and I can't see that getting through the Republican House of Representatives. So it just doesn't seem like the political will is there, and then it doesn't seem like a political path is there either.
Brian Murphy with us, WRAL TV, a sports investigative reporter. What are your takes on what we've seen the last couple of weeks with Alabama, baseball coach, and then Iowa State and Iowa? Probably just the start of what we might see more of when it comes to the gambling within college sports.
Yeah, I follow the sports gambling measures here in North Carolina very closely, and North Carolina may become the next state to legalize mobile sports gambling. And I think it cuts two ways. One, I think supporters of sports gambling will say, look, we only caught these things because the industry is regulated. And so, the Alabama baseball coach could have been placing these bets, and we never would have known about them if not for regulated gambling. And I think critics of this expansion of sports gambling will say, we're putting it in front of these kids day after day after day. It's impossible to ignore, and we're going to get more and more gambling happening, and that's a problem for us. So I think this issue really cuts both ways. I mean, it may also be time for the NCAA to address its gambling. I mean, it says you cannot gamble on anything, and so if you're a football player at the University of Iowa and you place a bet on the Super Bowl or you place a bet on the NBA Finals, that is against the rules. That's against the NCAA rules, even though it has nothing to do with your sport, nothing to do with your game. And so as gambling becomes ubiquitous around the country, does the NCAA have to come up with different lines to address this?
Brian, I did a segment on this, a top 5 segment yesterday, and it is going to be really interesting because right now they're starting to maybe turn away some of that money until they can get figured out. But I don't think that the college athletics can spurn DraftKings and FanDuel and whoever else pops up forever, and they're wanting to spend ad dollars with those places.
Yeah, I mean, some of these, Caesars, I think, had a deal with Michigan State and LSU, and they've sort of pulled back because of just how terrible that looks if guys are getting suspended for gambling and yet a gambling company is sponsoring your athletic department. On the other hand, as you guys well know, this is a never-ending search for dollars, and those gambling companies have lots of dollars to give. And so I don't know the answer. I mean, that's a really tough one, I think, for college administrators, for the NCAA to figure out, where is this line? If we allow these gambling companies to sponsor our stadiums and put their name all over our stadiums, then do we have to change our rules as to what athletes are allowed or not allowed to do? And that is having a bright line, no gambling on anything ever makes it pretty easy. If you start to loosen those lines, then I think it becomes even tougher.
We never thought, at least I never thought, there would be a college football playoff. We now have that. I never thought there would be a time, although it was long overdue, that athletes would get extra money for their value, right? Never thought we'd see an open transfer portal, so who knows? Maybe that will change a little bit the way the NCAA looks at gambling.
Yeah, it's not just the NCAA that has to deal with it. I mean, we've seen the NFL suspend Calvin Ridley. Now they've suspended other players for simply placing a bet from the facility. I mean, gambling has come so quickly. The Supreme Court decision was in 2018. We're 5 years after that, and it's expanded to, I think, 38 states on the last count. It's come so quickly that I think it's caught the leagues and the NCAA a little bit off guard with how do we handle this? But yes, I think the NCAA has changed so rapidly over even a shorter period of time that I don't put anything beyond. If you told me in 5 years we only have 2 football leagues and players are employees and they can gamble, well, hey, Okay, that makes sense. I mean, who knows? The NCAA is changing so quick.
Brian, one more thing on the ACC from where you are in Raleigh. Which school right now, or maybe schools in the ACC? I know Miami had their flair of dramatic when it comes to the NIL, but which schools in that Carolina area do you feel like have benefited the most? Is it Duke? Is it Wake Forest? Is it NC State? North Carolina? Who might that be?
Yeah, I'm not sure any of the schools here in North Carolina have done as well with NIL as some of the other teams, some of the other teams around the country. There hasn't been, North Carolina basketball, I guess I should take that back. North Carolina basketball has really benefited from it, or at least we thought they would. To get Armando Bacot back for another season, were able to bring back the entire core of the Final Four team. And I think NIL played a huge role in that. It didn't turn out so well. They were ranked preseason number 1 and then didn't make the NCAA tournament. So, be careful what you wish for. But I think on that side of things, North Carolina has had several, a women's basketball player has deals with Dunkin' Donuts and Beats and all of that. But, you look at what LSU's been able to do on the women's basketball side or the women's gymnastics side. You look at Texas A&M, you look at Miami. There hasn't been those kind of breakout performances from the schools here in North Carolina. If anything, the transfer portal combined with NIL, and I think those two go hand in hand, even though they're not related, has hurt North Carolina football. I mean, they've lost 21 players to the transfer portal from last year's team. North Carolina State's been a little better. Duke kind of swims in a different pond there, but Wake Forest lost its quarterback to Notre Dame. Is that something that would have happened before the transfer portal, before NIL? Probably not.
Brian, thank you very much. Appreciate you jumping on with us. Brian Murphy, WRAL TV on the NIL in the Senate, and also many other, including iGaming or gambling or what else is out there when it comes to college athletics. We appreciate his time. When we come back,